The rain came down in sheets, hammering the pavement like it wanted to drown the world. Ezra stood frozen on the porch, his father's words still burning in his ears. "You're no son of mine." The door slammed shut behind him, the sound sharper than any slap, locking him out of the only home he'd ever known. He was 18, soaked to the bone, with nothing but a duffel bag and a heart that felt like it might burst. The small town of Red Haven, Ohio, stretched out before him, its quiet streets suffocating under the weight of tradition. He'd always known coming out would cost him something, but he hadn't expected it to cost him everything. Not like this. Not so fast. Ezra's sneakers squelched as he stepped off the porch, the rain blurring his vision, or maybe that was the tears he refused to acknowledge. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Instead, he focused on the faint glow of the diner at the end of the street, a beacon in the storm. The Red Haven Diner was the kind of place where truckers swapped stories and old-timers nursed coffee. But tonight, it was his only refuge. Inside, the air smelled of grease and pie, warm and familiar. The bell above the door jingled, and heads turned curious, judgmental, the usual small-town stare. Ezra ignored them, his eyes scanning for a corner booth where he could disappear. That's when he saw him, a guy about his age, sitting alone, sketching furiously in a notebook. Dark curls fell over his forehead, and his brown eyes flicked up, meeting Ezra's with a spark that felt like a lifeline. "Hey," the guy said, his voice soft but steady. "You look like you need a seat." Ezra hesitated. He wasn't used to kindness from strangers. Not here. But something about the guy's gaze open, unguarded, made him slide into the booth across from him. "Thanks," he muttered, dropping his bag. "I'm Ezra." "Lucas," the guy replied, offering a small smile. He pushed his sketchbook aside, revealing a half-finished drawing of the diner's neon sign, glowing against a stormy sky. "Rough night." Ezra laughed, a bitter sound. "You could say that." He didn't elaborate, and Lucas didn't push. Instead, Lucas flagged down the waitress, ordered 2 coffees, and slid one to Ezra without a word. The gesture was small, but it felt like the first bit of warmth Ezra had felt all day. They sat in silence for a while, the rain drumming against the diner's windows. Ezra sipped the coffee, letting it burn his throat, grounding him. Lucas went back to sketching, his pencil moving with a quiet intensity. Every so often, their eyes met, and Ezra felt something stir, something he wasn't ready to name. "You from around here?" Lucas asked eventually, his tone casual but curious. "Born and raised," Ezra said, his voice tight. "Wish I wasn't." Lucas raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. Instead, he flipped his sketchbook to a new page and started drawing something else, a figure. Maybe, though Ezra couldn't quite tell. "I'm just passing through," Lucas said. "Got a gig in Columbus tomorrow." "Art thing." "Artist? Huh." Ezra leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "What kind?" "The kind that doesn't make any money," Lucas said with a grin. "Street art. Mostly. Murals. Chalk. Whatever gets people to stop and look." Ezra nodded, his guard slipping just a fraction. "Sounds like freedom." Lucas's eyes softened. "It can be. But it's lonely sometimes." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken stories. Ezra wanted to ask more, to spill his own mess of a life, but the weight of his father's rejection still pressed against his chest. Instead, he said, "You ever feel like you're running from something?" Lucas's pencil paused. "All the time." The diner's clock ticked past midnight, and the rain didn't let up. Ezra didn't know it yet, but that night in the diner, with Lucas's quiet presence across from him, was the start of something that would change everything. Something that would lead him to fight, to love, and to confront the father who'd cast him out in a way no one could have predicted. For now, though, it was just two strangers in a booth, sharing coffee and the kind of silence that felt like understanding. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air in Redhaven still felt heavy, like the town was holding its breath. Ezra woke up on a bench outside the diner, his duffel bag as a makeshift pillow, his body stiff from the cold. Lucas had offered to let him crash at his motel room, but Ezra had declined, too proud or too scared to accept more help. He found Lucas waiting for him inside the diner, nursing a fresh coffee and sketching again. "You look like hell," Lucas said, not unkindly, pushing a plate of pancakes across the table. "Eat." Ezra didn't argue. The pancakes were warm, sweet, and the first real food he'd had since yesterday's chaos. "You don't have to keep doing this," he said between bites. "The coffee, the food. I'm not your charity case." Lucas shrugged, his eyes on his sketchbook. "Never said you were. Just figured you could use a friend." The word friend hit Ezra harder than he expected. He'd never had many of those in Redhaven, not real ones. Growing up, he'd kept his head down, hiding who he was to avoid the whispers and glares. Coming out to his father had been a reckless act of defiance, one he'd known would end badly. And it had. "So, what's your plan?" Lucas asked, his tone light but probing. "You gonna stay in Redhaven?" Ezra snorted. "Hell no. I just don't know where to go yet." Lucas set his pencil down, his expression serious. "Come with me." Ezra blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "To Columbus. I've got a mural gig. Like I said, it's not much, but it's a start. You could crash with me for a bit, figure things out." The offer was tempting, but it also terrified Ezra. He barely knew Lucas, yet the idea of leaving Redhaven with him felt like a lifeline he couldn't ignore. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice low. "You don't even know me." Lucas leaned back, his eyes searching Ezra's. "Maybe I see something in you. Something worth helping." Ezra's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to push Lucas away, but the truth was, he had nowhere else to go. So he nodded, just once, and Lucas's face lit up with a smile that made Ezra's chest ache in a way he didn't understand. They hit the road that afternoon in Lucas's beat-up van, a rusted relic packed with art supplies and dreams. The drive to Columbus was quiet at first, the hum of the engine filling the space between them. Ezra stared out the window, watching Redhaven disappear in the rearview mirror, a weight lifting with every mile. "Tell me about your art," Ezra said, breaking the silence. He needed a distraction, something to keep his mind off the life he was leaving behind. Lucas's face lit up. "It's about telling stories," he said. "The kind people don't always want to hear. I did a mural in Chicago last year, two women holding hands, surrounded by flowers. Got some hate for it, but it made people stop and think. That's what matters." Ezra listened, captivated by Lucas's passion. He'd never met anyone like him, someone who lived so unapologetically, who turned their truth into art. "You ever paint anything about yourself?" he asked. Lucas's smile faltered, just for a moment. "Not yet, but I'm working up to it." The rest of the drive was filled with stories Lucas's travels, Ezra's childhood in Redhaven, the good parts and the bad. By the time they reached Columbus, Ezra felt like he'd known Lucas for years, not days. The city was a shock to his system, bustling, loud, alive in a way Redhaven never was. Lucas's place was a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat, cluttered with canvases and paint cans. But to Ezra, it felt like a palace. That night, as they sat on the floor eating takeout, Lucas sketched Ezra without asking. The pencil moved quickly, capturing the sharp lines of his jaw, the weight in his eyes. "You've got a story too," Lucas said, not looking up. "I can see it." Ezra didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not judged, not pitted, just seen. And when Lucas's hand brushed his as he passed the sketchbook over, Ezra's heart raced in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. He didn't know it yet, but that moment was the spark of something bigger, something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, family, and himself. Columbus was a whirlwind of color and noise, a stark contrast to the gray monotony of Red Haven. Ezra spent his first week trailing Lucas to his mural gigs, watching him transform blank walls into vibrant stories. Lucas painted with a ferocity that mesmerized Ezra, each stroke deliberate, each color a statement. Ezra had never seen someone create with such fearlessness, and it stirred something in him, a longing to be that bold. They fell into an easy rhythm, sharing Lucas's cramped apartment and late-night conversations. Ezra found a part-time job at a coffee shop to cover his share of the rent, determined not to be a burden. But the truth was, he was still reeling from his father's rejection, the wound raw and aching. Every night, he'd lie on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying those final moments on the porch. "You're no son of mine." The words haunted him, a reminder of everything he'd lost. Lucas noticed. He never pushed, but he had a way of coaxing Ezra out of his head. One evening, after a long day of painting, Lucas handed him a brush. "Try it," he said, pointing to a blank canvas in the corner of the apartment. "Just let it out." Ezra laughed, nervous. "I'm not an artist." "You don't have to be," Lucas said, his voice gentle but firm. "Just paint what you feel." Ezra hesitated, then dipped the brush in red paint, angry, vivid red. He slashed it across the canvas, not caring about form or skill, just needing to release the storm inside him. When he stepped back, the canvas was a mess of jagged lines and smeared colors. But Lucas looked at it like it was a masterpiece. "That's you," Lucas said, his voice low. "That's your fight." Ezra's throat tightened. He wanted to say anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he set the brush down and turned away, his heart pounding. Lucas didn't push, just let the moment settle. But Ezra felt the air shift between them, charged with something unspoken. The next day, Lucas took Ezra to a local LGBTQ+ community center, a place he'd found through his art network. The center was a haven of warmth and acceptance, filled with people who didn't flinch at who Ezra was. He met Mia, a trans woman with a sharp wit and a knack for organizing events, and Jamal, a non-binary poet whose words cut straight to Ezra's soul. For the first time, Ezra felt like he belonged somewhere. "You ever think about going back?" Lucas asked one night, as they sat on the apartment's fire escape, the city sprawling below them. "To Red Haven, I mean. To face him." Ezra tensed, his fingers gripping the railing. "Why would I? He made it clear he doesn't want me." Lucas looked at him, his eyes steady. "Maybe it's not about him. Maybe it's about you. Showing him you're still here. Still you. No matter what he thinks." The idea settled into Ezra's mind like a seed, small but persistent. He didn't want to face his father, not yet, but Lucas's words made him wonder if one day he could. For now, though, he was content to stay in Columbus, to let this new life take root. Their connection grew stronger with each passing day. Lucas's touches lingered, a hand on Ezra's shoulder, a brush of fingers when passing a coffee mug. Ezra felt the pull, the way his body leaned toward Lucas without his permission. He'd never let himself feel this way before. Not fully, not without fear. But with Lucas, the fear was quieter, drowned out by something warmer, something that felt like hope. One night, after a long day at the community center, Lucas suggested they go to a drag show downtown. Ezra had never been to one, but the energy of the club was electric music pulsing, lights flashing, performers commanding the stage with unapologetic joy. Lucas cheered louder than anyone, his laughter infectious, and Ezra found himself laughing too, the weight of his past lifting, if only for a moment. As they left the club, the night air cool against their skin, Lucas grabbed Ezra's hand. It was sudden, bold, and Ezra froze, his heart racing. "Is this okay?" Lucas asked, his voice soft but steady. Ezra nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Lucas's hand was warm, grounding, and for the first time in weeks, Ezra felt like he could breathe. They walked back to the apartment hand in hand, the city alive around them. Ezra didn't know where this was going, but for now, he didn't need to. He had Lucas. He had this moment, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Months passed, and Columbus became home in a way Red Haven never had. Ezra threw himself into his new life, working at the coffee shop, volunteering at the community center, and spending every spare moment with Lucas. Their connection deepened, no longer just a spark, but a steady flame. They hadn't labeled a Thad-needed Tobit the way Lucas looked at him, the way their hands found each other in quiet moments, said more than words ever could. But the past has a way of creeping back in. One afternoon, as Ezra was wiping down tables at the coffee shop, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. His heart stopped when he read it. "Ezra, it's Mom. I need to see you. Please." He hadn't spoken to his mother since that night on the porch. She'd stood silently behind his father, her eyes full of tears, but her voice absent. Ezra had assumed she agreed with his father's verdict, that she'd chosen silence over her son. The text shook him, reopening wounds he thought he'd buried. He showed the message to Lucas that night, his hands trembling. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice raw. "She didn't stand up for me. Why should I go back?" Lucas sat beside him on the couch, their knees touching. "Maybe she's trying now," he said gently. "Maybe she's ready to fight for you." Ezra wanted to believe him, but the thought of facing his mother off, facing Red Haven made his stomach churn. What if it's a trap? What if she just wants to drag me back to him? Lucas took his hand, his grip firm. "Then you don't go alone. I'll come with you." The idea of Lucas by his side made the impossible feel possible. Ezra nodded, and they made plans to drive to Red Haven the next weekend. The days leading up to the trip were tense, Ezra's nerves fraying with every passing hour. Lucas tried to keep things light, dragging him to art galleries and open mic nights. But Ezra could feel the weight of what was coming. The drive back to Red Haven was quieter than their first trip together. Lucas played music-soft indie tracks that filled the silence, but Ezra's mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment of that night he'd been cast out. When they pulled into town, the familiar streets felt like a punch to the gut. The house looked the same, its white paint peeling, the porch still sagging. Ezra's heart raced as he knocked on the door. His mother answered, her face pale and drawn. "Ezra," she whispered, her voice breaking. She stepped forward, arms open, but Ezra flinched, stepping back. Lucas stood behind him, a steady presence, his hand brushing Ezra's back. "Mom," Ezra said, his voice cold. "Why now?" She led them inside, her hands twisting nervously. The living room was unchanged, a shrine to a life Ezra no longer belonged to. Your father. He's not here, she said. He's at a church retreat. I wanted to talk to you alone. Ezra sat stiffly on the couch, Lucas beside him. You didn't say anything when he kicked me out, he said, his voice shaking with anger. You just stood there. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I know. I was scared. Ezra. Your father's always been so certain, so unyielding. I didn't know how to fight him. But I've been thinking about you every day since you left. Ezra wanted to believe her, but the hurt ran deep. Why didn't you call sooner? Why didn't you try? I was afraid, she admitted. But I'm here now. I want to make this right. Lucas squeezed Ezra's hand under the table, a silent reminder that he wasn't alone. They talked for hours, the conversation raw and painful. Ezra's mother apologized, again and again, promising to stand up to his father, to fight for their family. Ezra wasn't ready to forgive, not fully, but he felt a crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. As they drove back to Columbus that night, Ezra was quiet, processing. Lucas reached over, resting a hand on his knee. You okay? He asked. Ezra nodded, a small smile breaking through. Yeah, I think I will be. Back in Columbus, their bond grew stronger. The trip to Red Haven a turning point. Ezra started painting more, channeling his pain into art under Lucas's guidance. They worked on a mural together for the community, Centera, vibrant explosion of color. Two figures embracing under a sky of stars. It was their story, unspoken but undeniable. But Ezra knew this wasn't the end. His father was still out there, unyielding, and the thought of confronting him loomed like a storm on the horizon. What Ezra didn't know was how that confrontation would unfold and how it would change everything. The mural at the community center became a local sensation, drawing crowds and sparking conversations. Ezra and Lucas stood side by side at its unveiling, their hands brushing as the crowd cheered. For Ezra, it was more than art, it was a declaration, a way of saying, I'm here, and I'm not hiding. But the high of that moment was fleeting, overshadowed by the news that came a week later. Ezra's mother called, her voice trembling. Your father's coming to Columbus, she said. He heard about the mural. He's angry. Ezra's stomach dropped. He'd known this day might come, but the reality of it hit like a freight train. Lucas, ever steady, suggested they face it together, but Ezra wasn't sure he was ready. The thought of seeing his father again, of hearing that voice, those words made him feel like he was 18 again, standing on that rain-soaked porch. They prepared as best they could. Lucas helped Ezra practice what to say, role-playing the confrontation late into the night. The community center rallied around them, offering support and a safe space. Mia and Jamal promised to be there, their presence a reminder that Ezra had a family now, one that chose him. The day of his father's arrival was crisp, the autumn leaves painting Columbus in shades of fire. Ezra and Lucas waited at the community center, the mural glowing behind them. When the door opened and Ezra's father stepped inside, the air seemed to thicken. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a face carved from years of certainty. His eyes landed on Ezra, then flicked to Lucas, narrowing with disdain. Ezra, he said, his voice cold. You've made quite a spectacle. Ezra's heart pounded, but he stood tall. It's who I am, he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. I'm not hiding anymore. His father's jaw tightened. This isn't you. This is confusion. Sin. You can still come home, but you have to leave this behind. His gaze shifted to Lucas. Venomous. Lucas stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. He's not confused. He's happy. Maybe you should try listening to him instead of preaching. The room went silent, the tension electric. Ezra's father took a step closer, his voice low. You don't get to tell me about my son. He's not just your son, Lucas said, unflinching. He's his own person. And he's incredible. Ezra's chest swelled, a mix of pride and fear. He stepped between them, facing his father. You kicked me out because I wouldn't be who you wanted. But I'm not changing for you. I'm living my truth. And if you can't accept that, then you're the one who's lost. His father's face twisted, a mix of anger and something else, something like pain. You think you can just walk away from family? From God? I'm not walking away from family, Ezra said, his voice breaking. I'm building one. With people who love me for me. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. His father stared at him, searching for something, maybe the son he thought he knew. But Ezra wasn't that boy anymore. He was someone new, someone stronger, shaped by love and loss and the courage to be himself. His father turned and left without another word, the door slamming behind him. Ezra's knees buckled, and Lucas caught him, pulling him into a tight embrace. You did it, Lucas whispered. You stood up to him. Ezra buried his face in Lucas's shoulder, tears streaming down his cheeks. It wasn't just about standing up to his father, it was about standing up for himself, for the life he was building. The community center erupted in cheers, Mia and Jamal rushing forward to join the hug, their laughter and tears mingling with Ezra's. That night, back at the apartment, Ezra and Lucas sat on the fire escape, the city glittering below. I love you, Ezra said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He froze, terrified, but Lucas's smile was brighter than the stars. I love you too, Lucas said, leaning in to kiss him. It was soft, tentative, but it felt like a promisee of future they'd build together. Ezra didn't know what would come next, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He had Lucas, he had his chosen family, and he had himself. And that was enough. The confrontation with his father left Ezra changed, lighter somehow, like he'd shed a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. Columbus felt brighter. The community center a second home where he and Lucas spent their days painting, planning events, and dreaming up new projects. Their mural had sparked a movement, with local artists joining in to create more public works celebrating love and identity. Ezra felt like he was part of something bigger, something that mattered. But the past wasn't done with him yet. A month after his father's visit, Ezra received a letter, not a text, not a call, but a handwritten letter, postmarked from Red Haven. It was from his mother, and the sight of her familiar cursive made his heart ache. He opened it alone in the apartment, Lucas out on a mural job, the silence amplifying every word. Ezra, I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it. I've left your father. I couldn't stay in that house, in that life, knowing I failed you. I'm in Columbus now, staying with a friend. I want to see you, to be part of your life, if you'll let me. I'm learning. Ezra. I'm trying. Love. Mom. He read it 3 times, his emotions a tangle of hope and hurt. When Lucas came home, Ezra showed him the letter, his voice shaking as he explained. She's here, he said. She left him. Lucas's eyes widened. That's huge. Ezra. What do you want to do? Ezra didn't know. Part of him wanted to run to her, to rebuild what they'd lost. But another part, the part that remembered her silence, held back. I need time, he said finally. But I want to see her. They arranged to meet at a park near the community center, a neutral space where Ezra felt safe. When he saw his mother, she looked different, smaller, somehow, but her eyes were brighter, less burdened. She hugged him, and this time, he let her, though his arms were stiff at first. "I'm so proud of you," she said, tears in her eyes. "For everything you've done, everything you are." Ezra introduced her to Lucas, and to his surprise, she smiled warmly, shaking his hand. "Thank you," she said to Lucas, "for being there for him." They talked for hours, the conversation easier than Ezra expected. His mother shared her own journey leaving his father, finding her voice, starting therapy to unlearn the beliefs that had kept her silent. Ezra listened, his heart softening with every word. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a start. As winter settled over Columbus, Ezra and Lucas's relationship deepened. They moved into a slightly larger apartment, one with enough space for a shared studio. Ezra's paintings grew bolder, his colors brighter, reflecting the joy he was finding in himself. Lucas proposed a new projected citywide art installation celebrating chosen families, with contributions from the community center. The project consumed them, drawing them closer to Mia, Jamal, and the others. Ezra's mother started volunteering at the center, her presence a quiet but steady support. Ezra watched her grow, saw the way she listened to the stories of others, the way she was trying to understand. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One night, as they worked late on the installation, Lucas pulled Ezra aside. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice nervous. "About us. About forever." Ezra's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Lucas took his hand, his eyes shining. "I'm saying I want Thesis for the long haul. I know we're young, and life's messy, but I want to build something with you." Ezra didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, pulling Lucas into a kiss that felt like a vow. They laughed, breathless, their foreheads pressed together, the future stretching out before them. But even as they planned their life together, Ezra knew one final piece of his past remained unresolved. His father was still out there, a shadow over his happiness. And though he wasn't ready to face him again, he knew that day would come, and when it did, it would be on his terms. The art installation was unveiled in the spring, a riot of color and stories that transformed Columbus's downtown. Murals, sculptures, and poetry covered the streets, each piece a testament to love, resilience, and chosen family. Ezra's contribution was a painting of two hands clasped under a starry sky, a tribute to Lucas and the life they were building. The community center hosted a festival to celebrate, with music, food, and speeches that echoed with hope. Ezra's mother was there, beaming with pride, her arm around Ezra as they watched the crowd. She'd become a fixture at the center, her growth a quiet miracle. Ezra had started to forgive her, not all at once, but in small moments, her laughter at Mia's jokes, her tears at Jamal's poetry. She was trying, and that was enough for now. But the festival brought an unexpected guest. Ezra spotted him in the crowd, his broad shoulders unmistakable even from a distance. His father. The sight of him sent a chill through Ezra, but he squared his shoulders, Lucas by his side. This time, he wasn't afraid. His father approached, his face unreadable. "Ezra," he said, his voice quieter than Ezra remembered. "Can we talk?" Ezra nodded, leading him to a quiet corner of the festival, Lucas and his mother nearby, but giving them space. "What do you want?" Ezra asked, his voice steady. His father looked at the ground, then at the mural behind Ezra. "I saw your work," he said. "It's powerful." Ezra waited, his heart pounding. He wasn't sure what he expected: an apology, an argument, but he wasn't prepared for what came next. "I was wrong," his father said, his voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting you, saving you. But I was wrong. I lost you, and I don't know how to fix it. Ezra's breath caught. He dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, he didn't know what to feel. You hurt me, he said, his voice raw. You threw me out. You made me feel like I was nothing. His father's eyes filled with tears. I know. And I'll carry that shame for the rest of my life. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know I'm trying to change. Ezra looked at Lucas, at his mother, at the community that had become his family. He thought of the boy he'd been, standing in the rain, and the man he was now, surrounded by love. I don't know if I can forgive you, he said, but I'm glad you're here. It wasn't a reconciliation, not fully, but it was a start. His father nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes, and walked away, leaving Ezra with a sense of closure he hadn't realized he needed. That night, as the festival wound down, Ezra and Lucas stood under their mural, the stars above mirroring the ones they'd painted. You okay? Lucas asked, his arm around Ezra's shoulders. Ezra nodded, leaning into him. More than okay. They stayed there, wrapped in each other, as the city celebrated around them. Ezra's father's words had shattered him once, but what he'd done next, building a life, finding love, creating art, had rebuilt him stronger. He didn't know what the future held with his father, but he knew he had Lucas, his mother, and a community that loved him. And that was enough to face whatever came next.